Hello heroes and villains, welcome to Multiverse. We recently crossed 28,000 subscribers, and for that I have to say thank you. Today, to celebrate the occasion, we are going to answer a question that comes back from time to time. Multiverse, other than this universe online, what other games do you play? It will be a pretty long video if I mention all the games I played, so we will settle with a top 10 games according to Multiverse. The top best games ever made, ever, I swear. But before we get started with our top 10, basically way back when, in my days, we did not have video games. The closest we had were pinball machines. Yeah, sadly, I was there before we had the video games. Then at some point we had arcade games, and then a bit later we had the console games. And eventually later we had the PC games, but it took me a long time before I started playing PC games. When I was a kid, it pretty much started, you could say, with a fighting fantasy game. They were also called Find Your Fate or something like that. So we had those nice, basically it's the book where by the end of the paragraph you have to make choices, and depending on which choice you make, it will send you to another paragraph. So you don't really read the book in order. Pretty much at the end of each paragraph you have to make choices, and then depending on the choice you make will tell you which page to go to and which paragraph to go to. It was basically computer games before we had computer games. And then of course later on we started playing Dungeons and Dragons. Way back when, the edition we had was the Red Box edition, but eventually we got Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. But it was challenging to get a group of players that would come back every week for a gaming session. Every week there pretty much was always one or two guys missing. And that got even worse once guys started having girlfriends, and once they started having kids, it was much more difficult to get a gaming group together. So then we graduated pretty much from Magic the Gathering. With Magic the Gathering, we only needed to gather 4, 5, 6 people together. Didn't matter if it wasn't the same people week after week. As long as you had your deck with you, you were good to go. I like to play black to summon some evil skeletons. Sadly, one of the big strengths of playing black was to make your opponents discard. But I wasn't too big a fan of that strategy, so more often than not I would use evil undead creatures as opposed to having my opponent discard his cards. And then in 2001 I purchased my first computer ever, and that's when I discovered PC gaming, and my life was never the same after that. Obviously, the game that should be at the top of the list is DC Universe Online. I've been playing DC Universe Online for 12 years. I've played, if I trust my PS5, I played over 20,000 hours of DC Universe Online. And I made thousands and thousands of videos about DC Universe Online. So easily that would be the top spot. So I'm going to take a look at 10 other games other than DC Universe Online that I loved playing. So let us start with number 10. Lord of the Rings Online. Before I played DC Universe Online, I was playing Lord of the Rings Online. Sadly, once I started playing DC Universe Online, I didn't have enough time to be able to play 2 MMOs at the same time. So sadly, I pretty much gave up on Lord of the Rings Online. And before Lord of the Rings Online, I was playing Dungeons and Dragons Online. But with Lord of the Rings Online, when I started playing, basically I had a few months off between projects. And I had a few friends who were playing Lord of the Rings Online. So we played that for about a month and a half, 2 months in my friend's basement. And it was pretty awesome. I played for free for about a week, and then I subscribed right after that. It was basically $10 per month to subscribe to that game at the time, and it was pretty fun to play in the world of Lord of the Rings Online. But also you would play a storyline that was parallel to the storyline with the books, and sometimes you would interact with some of the characters from the books. So the interaction with the characters, the lore, and being in the world of Middle-earth, that made that game pretty awesome. And also I was playing with my friends, and we were pretty much all together. We did not have to play through chat or anything like that. We were pretty much all in the same room playing the game. It was pretty much like playing D&D together, but the computer was the game master. Number 9. Kingdom of Amalur Reckoning. That one was a pretty fun game, and I had a friend who lent me his copy. So I did not even have to purchase it at the time, although I bought it later on because I thought it was worth supporting that game. And it was a game that was pretty ambitious. They had hired R.A. Salvatore to write the story. They had hired Todd McFarlane as the art director or something like that. So they pretty much went out of their ways to hire big names to try to come up with something pretty epic. So it was a single player game with plenty of action. You had, even though the game technically was pretty linear, you did have some exploration to do. You had to discover a whole bunch of stuff throughout the maps. It was a pretty fun game, and the combat was pretty different than anything else at the time. So plenty of action, plenty of exploration in exploring the maps, and of course the story was pretty cool as well. And number 8 was Arcanum. That was a really fun game. At the time, there was a handful of games that I was playing, and replaying over and over, and I was looking for more games of the same kind. And sadly, at the time, there wasn't that many of those games. So when Arcanum came out, it was a really nice surprise. It was pretty much a steampunk game in an alternate world where there was like an alternate version of history, where it actually was elves and dwarves and that kind of stuff, and there actually was some steampunk technology in that world. And the game was awesome, despite it had a few flaws that could have easily made it a terrible game. But the game was so good that despite its flaws, it is on this list. The first flaw the game had was combat. Sadly, they tried to make combat so that you could either play turn-based or you could play real-time if you wanted to. Sadly, the combat was too difficult to play in real-time, and when you played turn-based, it was too easy to play in turn-based. So sadly, it wasn't balanced very well for either turn-based or real-time. It was balanced for somewhere in between. So sadly, you ended up with a game that was either too easy or too hard, depending if you played turn-based or not. Another issue is that there was a lot of bugs, a lot of issues with the game. Heck, you could not even play the game without a day 1 patch. The game was pretty much unplayable. Like pretty much, you had some scrolls that you would find that would give you information, and without the day 1 patch, you could not read the scrolls. The scrolls were blank. So although once you had the day 1 patch, it would solve most issues, but even then, there's still a few issues, a few bugs that would remain, even with the day 1 patch. But the world was so rich, the lore was pretty awesome, that despite all these flaws, it was an awesome game. Number 7, Diablo. Actually, I should mention Diablo 2. Diablo and Diablo 2 is pretty different games. And I wouldn't say really I'm a Diablo fan. I'm more of a Necromancer fan. I mentioned how I purchased my first computer in 2001, and at the time I had no intention at all to play PC games. But then I have a friend who had, for some reason, he had 2 copies of Diablo 2, so he gave me one of his copies, so I gave it a try, and I spent my 2 weeks vacation for Christmas playing Diablo 2. Heck, I would fall asleep with my computer, and then when I would wake up, I would keep on playing. So I understood later on when I saw like messages in certain games that said, yeah, even though your character doesn't have to eat, you have to eat. So make sure to stop to eat. I can understand. I spent 2 weeks from as soon as I would wake up until I would fall asleep. I would play Diablo 2, and I had a lot of fun. So this is pretty much how I got into computer gaming. And once I was done with Diablo, I was looking for more games, more similar games. So that's why I got a whole bunch of games that you will see on this list. I was looking basically for the next experience. But again, in this case, I would not really say that I'm a Diablo fan. I'm more of a Necromancer fan. Basically, I tried Diablo 2, I tried the Necromancer, and summoning an army of undead, holy crap, that was awesome. And I played the Necromancer very differently than most people. Basically, I had my army of undead, and I would back them up with the best bow I could find. And instead of, I see a lot of Necromancer that will have high strength, so that they can have the biggest armor they can find. In my case, it was more high dex. I would put a lot of point in dexterity, so that I could have the biggest bow I could find. And for the armor, I wasn't really wearing the biggest armor, or I wasn't using also the bone one very much. I was pretty much using my trusted bow, my army of undead, and that was my Necromancer. Loved it. Number 6, we have Dragon's Dogma. That was a fun game. It had some of the best bosses I've seen in any game. And basically, when you were fighting bigger bosses, you could actually climb on those bosses, and like you could climb on the back of a big ogre or a giant and stab it in the back. There were these chimera that would sometimes try to fly away. You could try to grab the chimera, climb on its back, and then keep on fighting it so that it wouldn't fly away. It was a fun game. And it had a feature where you had a few followers following you around. Basically, you would create one follower, and then you could recruit two other followers. And the best part is that if you had a friend who was playing the game, you could recruit the follower that one of your friends created if you wanted to. And the experience you gained with that follower would benefit your friend, and the same with your friend. If your friend took your follower, the experience your friend would gain with your follower would benefit your follower and yourself. It was a pretty fun system. And the story was pretty awesome. It had a few twists and turns, a few surprises, a few plot twists that were pretty awesome. And it's one of those games that you could play forever and ever if you wanted to. And basically, there's a point where you could fight endless bosses if you wanted to, until you decide to complete the storyline. There's been talks of Dragon's Dogma 2 for a long time. Basically, they announced it officially, I think, when we had the 10-year anniversary for Dragon's Dogma. So hopefully we'll get Dragon's Dogma 2 soon enough. I guess we're gonna have to wait and find out. Number 5, we have Dragon Age Origins. I love that game. You have plenty of options to create your main character, and you can recruit 3 NPCs with your character. And the NPCs were pretty well developed, and the story and the world building was pretty awesome. Basically, you get recruited with a group called the Grey Wardens, and you have to fight some evil creatures called the Darkspawns. And also, the character creation was pretty awesome. Depending on what character you created, you would have a different start at the start of the game. If you created, let's say, an elf character, you would start in a small elven village. And also, there were two types of elves. There were wood elves and city elves. So, if you created a city elf, you would start in the city. If you created a wood elf, you would start in the woods. If you created a dwarf, you would start underground in the dwarven city. If you created a human, you would start in a castle where you would be a nobleman. And if you created a mage, an evil mage, in that world the mage are not liked very much. But so when you started as a mage, you would start in the mage tower. It was a bit reminiscent of Dragonlance, where mages had to be trained in the Tower of Ice Sorcery. And at first I tried a bit all the origins. I tried to create a human fighter, then an elven rogue. But as soon as I created the mage, I kept on playing and playing and playing. So my first playthrough ended up being with my mage character. The story was pretty awesome. There was plenty of surprises. Again, plenty of plots and twists and all that good stuff. It was a great game. It was great enough that I purchased it on PC, and then later on when I purchased a PS3, I also purchased the game on PS3. That's how much I love that game. And you may notice, it's where I got some of the inspiration for my thumbnails. Basically, I would make a white background, I would put a Superman emblem in the white background, and in the shape of the Superman emblem, I would put something related to the video. Either the character I was talking about, the style I was talking about, or something like that. In the series, I would have included the entire Dragon Age series. Sadly, with each Dragon Age game, they decided to reinvent the wheels every time. So Dragon Age 2 was a completely different game than Dragon Age Origin, and the same with Dragon Age Inquisition. So although I did have some fun with Dragon Age 2 despite everything, and I did have fun also with Dragon Age Inquisition. Dragon Age Inquisition was a fairly big game. There was plenty of exploration, but Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition were nowhere near as good as Dragon Age Origins. There is Dragon Age 4 that should come at some point. Sadly, will it be as good as Dragon Age Origins? Will it be sadly as not good as Dragon Age 2? I guess we're gonna have to wait and find out. Number 4, Icewind Dale. I love the Infinity Engine games, so don't be surprised if you see more Infinity Engine games on this list. So at the time when I got my first PC, I was looking for more RPG games. Basically, you'll notice a lot of those games are RPGs. That's pretty much the kind of game I really enjoy. So when I got my first PC, I was looking for more and more RPG games, and Icewind Dale was a pretty awesome game. Yeah, it's more of a dungeon crawl than an RPG. There isn't that much role playing. There's a lot more combat and a lot more exploration. Although the game is a bit linear, but there is some exploration still to do when playing the game. And unlike some of the other Infinity Engine games, you create the whole party. In other games, you create the one character, and then as you play the game, you recruit the party members. In Icewind Dale, you actually create the whole party. Although it is a game based on Dungeons and Dragons, and the early levels of Dungeons and Dragons are pretty much unforgiving. Very often you start with some of your characters have like only 4 hit points, so it's very easy for some of your characters, if not the whole party, to get wiped early on if you're not careful. Sometimes just a small army of goblins, if they take you by surprise, they can wipe your whole party. So you have to be extra careful. And it's also where I fought my first dragon. Basically, in the expansion, there is a dragon. The end boss, spoiler alert, the end boss is pretty much a dragon. It is a small dragon, though. And much later in future Infinity Engine games, there would be some much bigger dragons. Or even in Dragon's Dogma. In Dragon's Dogma, holy crap, the dragons are huge. But again, this was my first dragon, so it was pretty awesome. And if you had read some D&D books like the Crystal Shard or the Icewind Dale trilogy, some of the locations were actually already familiar. It was kind of nice to visit the 10 towns, which we already knew about at least a little bit from reading the books. So overall, a fun action game, a fun dungeon crawl, loved it. And next we have Fallout. I knew absolutely nothing about Fallout at the time, but again I had a friend who somehow he had an extra copy. He had an extra copy of Fallout in Fallout 2. So he gave me his extra copy, and holy crap, did I have a lot of fun with that game. I had absolutely no expectation, I did not know anything about Fallout, and I loved it. Again, I loved the Infinity Engine games, and I was always looking for more RPG, either like the Infinity Engine games or something similar enough, and Fallout was pretty awesome. The story was pretty awesome, exploring the world was pretty awesome. Fallout 2 wasn't quite as good as Fallout 1. Basically, with Fallout 2, you start 100 years after Fallout 1. And it created a bit of a disconnect in my case. So I had to get used to the idea that I was 100 years after Fallout 1. And sadly, my character from Fallout 1 was long dead. But like Fallout 1, we had plenty of open world to explore. And the story was pretty good with a lot of surprises. And the NPCs. The NPCs were very unique. And it was pretty great to interact with them. And I will be a bit of a cheater pumpkin eater. I will even include Fallout 3. So basically Fallout 1, Fallout 2, and Fallout 3, I would count that as one big experience. Although Fallout 3 was very different. Basically Fallout 1 and 2 were made on the Infinity Engine game. And the Infinity Engine games are isometric games with a top-down point of view, basically a third-person point of view. As opposed to with Fallout 3, you can actually play in first person with Fallout 3. And Fallout 3 had 3D graphics, as opposed to the Infinity Engine games that were only 2D graphics. It's one of the first games I got when I got my PS3. I would say that it's because I really wanted to play this game, but it was pretty much a lack of option. When I bought my PS3, there was literally no games on the shelves. I had to purchase used games because if you wanted to purchase a new game at the time, the shelves were empty for some reason. So I had to go to places like EB Games and purchase used games. And the worst part is that those used games were almost as expensive as a brand new game. Basically, they would give you a $5 discount when you purchase the used game. Although you had no real choice because if you wanted to purchase the game brand new, the store shelves were empty at that time for some reason. So you had no choice. Either you paid almost full price for a used game, or you just didn't play the game. And with Fallout 3, holy crap, did I have a lot of fun with that game. And full disclosure, the first time I played Fallout 3, I had no idea how to properly read the map or the quest tracker. So I ended up going in the wrong direction. There's a main quest that you have to play, and somehow I had no idea that there's a little arrow that was pointing towards the main quest. So I went completely in the other direction, and I pretty much went all around the map before I finally came back to complete the main quest. And by the time I came back to play the main quest, I was well equipped. I had my power armor and everything. It was pretty cool. And you had a pretty big open world that you could explore. So if you like to explore games, this is a great game for that. And again, the story was pretty awesome. The NPCs were pretty awesome. And there's plenty of choices in what to do. Heck, there's even a point where you can blow up a whole city using a nuclear bomb. So you can make evil choices if you want to. Although as much as I love the Fallout, somehow I did not play Fallout 4, and I really don't have any intention of playing Fallout 76. And number 2, the Baldur's Gate Saga. I'm going to cheat a bit here. Basically, I will count Baldur's Gate, Baldur's Gate 2, and the expansions as one big game, because that's pretty much what it is. It's one of those times where when you play Baldur's Gate 2, you can actually import your character from Baldur's Gate 1, and you literally play the game with the same character from beginning to the end. And already with Baldur's Gate 1, at the time I was a foolish fool. I did not know how to use the AI, so my party members kept on dying, and I was playing pretty much as if I was playing a D&D. So I was going back to the temple to pay a bit of cash to raise my party members, but I had to do that so much that eventually I was freaking broke. So I decided to heck with that, no more party members, and I did the whole thing solo with my mage thief. And it pretty much became a tradition after that. Whenever I would play a game, especially an Infinity Engine game, but even other games, I would create pretty much a mage thief and would play the game solo with that character. Although in some games, obviously, they did not have a mage thief, so I would create the closest approximation to mage thief as I could. And it was pretty challenging at first, but once the mage thief got pretty much to higher levels, it was a bit easier than having a full party. So when I was done playing Diablo 2 and I was looking for more games, this is the game I found. And holy crap did I play that game. If there was a persistent Baldur's Gate game, I probably would still be playing it. Yeah, there's Neverwinter, but it's really not the same. And with Baldur's Gate, it was basically playing Dungeons and Dragons by yourself. You did not need to have a game master, the computer was the game master, and you would recruit party members as you played the game. Unlike Icewind Dale, with Icewind Dale you create the whole party. With Baldur's Gate, you create your main character, and then you recruit party members as you play the game. The one thing I didn't like though is that if your main character dies, it's game over and you have to reload your latest save. But again, the story, there was a pretty good story with some nice surprises, some great NPC to recruit along the way. The interaction sometimes with the NPC was very surprising. Sometimes if you had two NPCs of a different alignment in your party, they would tolerate themselves at first, but after a while they would pretty much just start fighting each other. I remember the first time two NPCs did that. Like at some point I saw them disappear from my party, and then I saw them fighting each other, and I thought, what the heck is going on? So I tried to separate them. I got them back into the group, but as soon as they came back into the group, poof, they would leave again, and they would fight each other again. That was awesome. Or there's even an NPC at some point that betrays you in your group. So there was a lot of surprises throughout the game, and also you would explore a familiar setting. Basically, you were exploring the Forgotten Realms, which is a familiar D&D setting, and you would meet some characters like Elminster. You would fight some evil wizards of Thay, the Red Wizards. You would fight or join the Shadow Thieves, depending on the choices you made. So it was great to be in that familiar setting, as opposed to other games like Dungeons & Dragons Online. Technically, wasn't a bad game. The problem is that they decided to use a setting like Eberron, which I didn't really like very much. I wish they had made the game in a familiar setting like the Forgotten Realms, or even the Dragonlance, why not? Sadly, they decided to go with Eberron. Oh well. Although I think these days they added the Forgotten Realms settings to Dungeons & Dragons Online, maybe I should give it a try again. But with Baldur's Gate, again, meeting Elminster or meeting the famous Drizzt Do'Urden, that was pretty awesome. And even some of the newer characters that I was not familiar with before I played Baldur's Gate, like Minsc and Boo. Minsc was a pretty cool, a bit crazy ranger, and Boo was so cute. And already with Baldur's Gate, if you explored every corner, you could easily have 250 hours, maybe more, of gameplay. And if you add the expansion, if you add Baldur's Gate 2, if you add the Throne of Baal, holy crap, you have a huge game that could easily take you 400-500 hours to complete from start to finish. So overall, playing Baldur's Gate was a great experience, and then after that, I had to look for more games like that. So after that, I discovered Icewind Dale, and And then later on we got Dragon Age Origin, which was pretty much the closest thing we got from Baldur's Gate in quite a while. And eventually we got Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition and Baldur's Gate 2 Enhanced Edition, which kind of tweaked the games a bit and added a few more things to the game. The Baldur's Gate saga was an epic saga, and sadly there's no other game that came close ever since. Having a game that starts in Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2 that ends up being a huge game for like 400 or 500 hours, I haven't seen anything like that since then. I guess there's Neverwinter that has a persistent world and that has new DLC added all the time. Sadly, Neverwinter, not quite as good as Baldur's Gate. And before we take a look at our number one, let's take a look at a few honorable mentions. Neverwinter Nights could have been a pretty good game. Sadly, it was a bit of a mess. Supposedly, originally it wasn't supposed to be a game, it was only supposed to be a tool set so that people could create modules for other players to play. Sadly, it didn't quite work as well as they hoped. And also, people were not too happy when they first heard about that. So apparently they came up with a campaign pretty much at the last minute, and it kind of showed. Also, they got rid of a lot of stuff from Baldur's Gate that worked in Baldur's Gate, and they tried to add also things from Diablo 2. Sadly, something that too often happens. Instead of telling themselves that we made Baldur's Gate, which was pretty awesome, and then we made Baldur's Gate 2, which was even more awesome, and they tried to copy Diablo 2 instead. Because Diablo 2 was selling a little bit better than Baldur's Gate 2. So even though they already had success with Baldur's Gate 2, that wasn't enough. They had to try to copy Diablo 2, and it kind of hurt Neverwinter Nights in the long run. And next we have Destiny. I'm not really a shooter fan, but in the case of Destiny, I really enjoyed it despite being a shooter. Sadly, the one thing I didn't like is that they made Destiny 2. When they made Destiny, they were promising that it was this huge epic storyline that would last 10 years and all that good stuff. So we kind of expected the game to be around for 10 years. Sadly, after about 2 years, they came up with Destiny 2. And sadly, with Destiny 2, we had to start again from scratch. If we had been able to import a character from Destiny into Destiny 2, it would not have been too much of an issue. Sadly, with Destiny 2, we had to start again from scratch. So we had to start again from scratch with a brand new character. We had to farm and farm again for our gear. And I did play Destiny 2 for a bit, but then I didn't have the strength to start all over again. So I gave up on Destiny right there and then. I think the game plan was to have a brand new Destiny every 2 or 3 years. And I just didn't have the strength to start over again. And even worse, to start over again, only to have to start over again in 2 or 3 years. Although we still have Destiny 2 right at this point, so I guess they gave up on that idea. They kept on going with Destiny 2, but maybe I should give it a try again at some point. We'll see. And our number one, Planescape Torment. Holy crap, did I enjoy this game. Basically, you start as a dead man, you wake up in the mortuary, and then you have to discover who you are and what happened to you. It had a great story, a pretty touching story. I have to admit, by the end of the game, when the game ends, the final cinematic was a bit touching. Also, there's an NPC that used to be your lady. That when you meet her and exchange dialogues with her, that was really sweet as well. And the NPCs were awesome. They had some great NPCs: Valor, the Fallen Paladin, Ignis, the evil Pyromancer, Morte, basically a floating skull that acts as a warrior. The game had a pretty rich storyline, some great dialogues, some great interaction with the NPCs. I loved it. And I remember at the time when I played Planescape Torment, I thought that from now on, games could not give us less than what Planescape did. I thought that we got a great storyline with Planescape. Surely storylines of future games will be as good, if not better than this. There's no way that this is as good as it gets. And sadly, for quite a while, this is pretty much as good as what we got. The game originally came out, I think at the same time as Baldur's Gate, but I played it much later. Basically, I played Baldur's Gate 2, then Icewind Dale, and then I played Planescape Torment. And sadly, I foolishly thought that games would only get better and better after that, and sadly, that wasn't quite the case. Sadly, the stories of games that came after Torment, a lot of those are not so good. Although at the time, we were pretty much in the transition between 2D graphics and the 3D graphics. So sadly, a lot of resources were going to into the 3D graphics of those games. So I guess they were not putting too much resources into story at the time, or maybe they were struggling so much with the graphics that they could not pay enough attention to the story, or maybe they were limited by what they could do with the graphics, which did not allow them to make a story as complex as they could or should have. But it was a bit of a learning experience. Basically, it taught me that sadly things do not always improve. Sometimes there's ups and downs, and we saw it even recently. Like you would think that after DC Universe Online, MMOs that come after DC Universe Online would try to at the very least match what DCO did. Like when we got the Marvel MMO, Marvel Heroes, you would have thought they would have tried to make something at least as good as DC Universe Online, if not better. And sadly, with Marvel Heroes, they went all the way back to Diablo. They basically made a Diablo game with Marvel characters, and not even Diablo 2, which is the good Diablo. Basically, they went back to Diablo 1, so it was quite a step back, sadly. So with Planescape Torment, the richness of the story, and more importantly, the richness of the NPCs, is why this game is number one. Yes, it is a game with 2D graphics. If you need the 3D graphics to be able to enjoy a game, odds are you probably wouldn't enjoy a Planescape Torment. But if you don't mind 2D graphics, and if you love games that have great storylines and great NPC, you should probably give it a try. And there is also an enhanced edition, which improved the game at least a little bit compared to when it was first released. So there you go, guys. So yes, obviously there's a lot of RPGs in my list, and there's even other RPGs I could add. I could have talked about Pool of Radiance 2. Pool of Radiance 2 was a disaster with a whole bunch of bugs when it was first released, but it was a great learning experience because it taught me to be able to bypass bugs. Basically, there were bugs that I had to research to find out how to bypass those bugs, and there's even a few bugs or two where I pretty much had to figure out where to go into the various files and edit some of those files so that the game would actually work. Or the Temple of Elemental Evil, which was a module we had played way back when I played D&D, and it was great to be able to go back in a game and explore the temple one more time. I could probably make another video talking about a whole bunch of other games. Maybe I'll do that in the future. Maybe when we reach 29,000 subscribers. Maybe when we reach 1 million subscribers. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. So again, guys, we have reached 28,000 subscribers. And for that, guys, I have to say thank you. When I started my little channel, I never thought this day would be possible. And now here we are. So hopefully someday we'll reach 30,000. 50,000, 1,000,000. The sky is the limit.